Do you want to be made well? What happens when your doctor asks you that when you go to the doctor? Because, you want to get better? And we all say, duh. This is why I'm here. I want to be made well. But when we stop and take the time and think carefully, whether it's about our physical well-being, our emotional or spiritual well-being, we may well want to think twice about that answer. Because being made well often means changing how we do things. And we don't always like change a whole lot. Jesus goes into the pool of Bethesda and into the porticos, and he sees all these people sitting and lying there who all had disabilities or infirmities of one sort or another. And there was a legend, there's no historical grounds for this, but there was a legend that when the pool would get all stirred up, that the first person who got down there would be healed. And for some reason, Jesus hones in on this one man. And he walks up to him and he says, "Do you want to be made well?" What does the man say? Look back in your bulletins. Look back in the gospel. What does this man say to Jesus? Does he say yes, duh? No. What does he do? What does he do? What does he say? Yeah, I need somebody to help me down there. He makes an excuse in one sense. One way of looking at it is that he makes an excuse. He never affirms that he indeed wants to be made well. You would think that he would after 38 years, but think about it. He's spent 38 years being in the same place, doing the same thing, having people offer him, we can't assume he was a beggar, but he had to eat somehow. He had people taking care of him. And although he may have been in pain, it was what he was used to. And wasn't it, for him to get up and walk meant a total change, 180-degree turn in the way he had been living his life. Did he want to be made well? Hard to say. Hard to say. I was talking with a friend of mine last week, and we got talking about changes that had been happening in our lives, and I asked her, I said, I have wondered for years, and I still don't have a grip on this. Why is it so easy to start a bad habit and so hard to give it up? You would think that if we're going to do something good for ourselves, that we would start doing something good for ourselves. But that's not the way it works. And she sort of smiled at me and sort of commiserating, saying, yeah, I know what you're talking about. But she also said, when I find myself dealing with a bad habit, it usually means I'm trying to avoid something. Because the things that we always do get us what we've always done. And it's easier and often less threatening that even though we know what we're doing isn't healthy or helpful, we just don't have the time or the energy or whatever it takes to make a change. Either that or we imagine that the change is going to be so big that we can't envision ourselves getting there, and we forget that we can take little steps. So I was, again, continuing to think about this week, and I've come to the conclusion that busyness is as much habit as it is the things that we spend our time being busy at. Okay? That we get ourselves into the habit of going to work and getting our groceries and taking the kids to all their activities, or volunteer work, or taking care of 5 neighbors, or whatever it happens to be. We get ourselves into this habit and this energy expending way of doing things without stopping for a little while and just saying, is this good for me? Is this good for my family? What am I missing because I'm so busy? We tend to look outside of ourselves and say it's all because of the stuff out there that's keeping me busy, rather than to realize I'm making an active choice to participate in all of these things. And I'm including church work here. I'm talking about our entire lives. And isn't it, do we want to be made well? Hard to say sometimes. Because we get so used to doing what we're doing that sometimes it even takes energy to think about doing something differently. A few years ago, there was a group of salesmen who had gone to a regional conference in Chicago, and the meeting had ended a little bit late, and so they were racing through the airport to catch their planes. And on the way through the airport, one of them bumped into a table that was full of apples, of baskets of apples that a young woman was selling. And they just kept on going for their gates. And you've got apples all over the floor. One of the men stopped, and he called to the guys. He said, call my wife, tell her I'm going to take a later flight. Tell her I'll be home, I'm just taking a later flight. And he turned around, went back to the table, and when he got there, he realized that the woman was blind. That she could not see. She knew everything had fallen, but she had no idea where anything was. And nobody else who had gone past her in the meantime had done anything to help. So when he got there, and he was going to help her anyway, but he realized how much more difficult the situation was because she was blind. And so she was on the floor, kneeling on the floor, trying to reach for the apples and pull them in close to her. And he got down on the floor with her and got the baskets. And as he helped pick up the apples, he saw which ones were already bruised, which had been damaged. And he put those in a separate basket and put the good ones into got everything put back together, got the baskets up on the table. And he pulled out his wallet, and he gave her $40. And he said, these are for the apples that were damaged. He said, I hope this hasn't ruined your day completely. And he turned and started walking back to get his flight rearranged. Not knowing that he was leaving, she called out, she said, Mister, turned around and came back a little bit, and she said, are you Jesus? And he said, oh no. He said, I'm not Jesus. Jesus is good and kind and caring and loving, and he would never have knocked down your table in the first place. And she nodded and she said, well, I was just wondering because I was praying to Jesus to ask him to send someone to help me. So you are like him. Thank you for listening to God's call. And he turned, don't know if he said anything back to her, but he turned, and as he was walking away to make arrangements for his ticket, and for the rest of the day, asked himself, am I Jesus? This man stopped his busyness. He set aside his agenda, his goal of getting home to his family. And even though he had not been the person to knock over the table, he stopped and went to care and realized that there was even more to this situation than he ever knew in the first place. Is busyness so much a habit for us that we aren't conscious of what's in front of us and ways in which we can stop and take a breather and do something simple enough to let another person know that they're loved and cared for? Are we so busy that we don't stop long enough to ask ourselves, are we unwell? If not, then we're a victim of our own habits. Habits which, yes, to change takes intention and takes energy and may take breaking something of our life down into little tiny pieces so we can start small. I'm one of these folks who when I see something out there that either I really want to do or that is really important to have done or whatever, jumps to the result, to the very end part. And don't break it into small pieces. And by doing that, by jumping to the end, I always, 100% of the time, underestimate how long something's going to take to do. Just ask my family. That's why I'm working very hard on teaching myself how to slow down long enough to say what comes between now and then. And how do I balance that? You can't always balance it. You can't always. There's times when in our lives things happen and we have to react as well as respond. Are we like the man at the pool who has become used to his life, used to the rhythm, perhaps even threatened by getting up and having to walk? We may. Not about our whole lives, maybe about one thing. But just as Jesus asked the man who was lame, Jesus also asks us, do you want to be healed? Amen.